Good evening to all of you. My name is Akanksha Pathak and I welcome you all to this new initiative, that is the Analyst. What is this initiative all about? In this, we'll enable you to understand that how you are supposed to cover the current articles when it comes to your main stage of the examination and how you are supposed to cover the current affairs when it comes to the prelim stage of your examination. Okay, so let's have a look over the important articles of today's newspaper. So these are the articles that we are going to cover today. First, we'll be covering the issue of legalization of same-sex marriage, okay. Then we'll be covering the recent changes in IT rules, okay. Then we'll be covering the recent UN report which states that India is going to surpass China when it comes to population growth. Then we'll be covering the issue of civil societies and FCRA, because recently the CBI has filed a case against Oxfam India on account of violation of FCRA rules. Okay. And lastly, we'll be covering the National Quantum Mission. Okay. So these four initial articles we'll be covering from the mains perspective, and the last article we'll be covering from prelims perspective. Okay. So let's begin. So the first article that we need to cover is legalization of same-sex marriage. Now, this article is very important from your GS paper 2, okay, because this pertains to this aspect of welfare schemes related to vulnerable section, okay. So let's have a look. What is the context right now? Recently, as we know that Supreme Court is looking into all the petitions which argue regarding legalization of same-sex marriage. And in this regard, the central government has told the Supreme Court that it has also asked all the chief secretaries of different states and union territories to seek the opinion of the states and union territory with regard to the issue of legalization of same-sex marriage. Now, the first thing that we need to understand that when we say legalization of same-sex marriage, what do we exactly mean by that? Okay, legalization of same-sex marriage imply marriage between people of same gender. Okay, and if we legalize same-sex marriage, then the homosexual couples would be able to enjoy the parental rights, right to inheritance, okay, property rights, etc., which are applicable or which are enjoyed by heterosexual couples, okay, on account of marriage. Now, let's have a look over the for and against arguments with respect to the issue of legalization of same-sex marriage. Now, the first for argument which is put forth is Special Marriage Act 1954. Now, it is being argued that the forward-looking approach which we have adopted under the Special Marriage Act, why are we not adopting this forward-looking approach when it comes to legalization of same-sex marriage? Now, what is this Special Marriage Act all about? It enables the interfaith as well as intercaste couples to solemnize their marriage without having to undergo religious conversions. Okay, so without undergoing religious conversion, the interfaith couples or intercaste couples can solemnize their marriage. Okay, so it is being argued that why are we not extending this forward-looking approach when it comes to the issue of legalization of same-sex marriage? Okay, next it is being argued that in order to uphold Article 21, which pertains to right to life and personal liberty, because in one of the famous landmark judgment, that is Shafin Jahan versus Ashokan KM and others 2018 case, which is popularly known as the Hadia case, in this landmark judgment, the Supreme Court stated that every citizen of India have the right to marry a person of one's own choice, okay, under Article 21. Now, it is being argued that when every citizen of India is having this right to marry a person of one's own choice, then why this right is not being extended to LGBT community? Okay. Then this brings me to the next argument, which is in order to uphold fundamental right which is provided under Article 14 and under Article 15, which talks about right to equality and which talks about non-discrimination by the states on grounds of sex, caste, religion, etc. Now, it is being argued that when other citizens of India have this right to marry a person of one's own choice, then why this right is not being extended to LGBT community? Why they are being discriminated on account of sexuality, on account of sex? Okay. Then, in order to uphold the idea of liberty which is enshrined in our Indian Constitution, as we know that Indian Constitution talks about qualified liberty. That means creating environment so that an individual could realize one's own potential fully. Okay, so in order to realize this idea of liberty also, we need to legalize same-sex marriage. Okay, then Lastly, given the international practice, right now, around 33 countries have already legalized the same-sex marriage, and Netherlands was the first to legalize same-sex marriage way back in 2001 itself. So why India is still not legalizing same-sex marriage? Okay. Now, let's have a look over the arguments against legalization of same-sex marriage, which have been basically put forth by the central government itself. Okay. The central government in this regard has argued that if we legalize same-sex marriage, we would be destabilizing the institution of marriage itself, which is considered to be as a holy sanskara in case of India. Okay. When we say marriage, in India, we accept marriage as a holy union between a man and a woman. Okay. Now, if we legalize same-sex marriage, then this very institution of marriage would get destabilized. Okay. Then the central government has argued that if we legalize same-sex marriage, we would be disturbing the delicate balance which is right now in place with regard to social morality and with regard to personal laws which are there in place. Because currently, all the personal laws with regard to all the religion allow only heterosexual marriages. Okay. And this is also something which is there in our societal morality also. In our society, there is heteronormativity. That is, we consider sexual relation between opposite sex as normal. Okay. We do not allow sexual relation between same sex. Okay. Then the central government has further argued that since it is the parliament which basically reflects the will of the people, it is the parliament which is the right place to discuss all the associated issues when it comes to legalization of same-sex marriage. So please refrain from taking any decision when it comes to legalization of same-sex marriage. Then it is being argued that the Supreme Court, in one of its famous landmark judgment, that is Navtej Singh Johar case 2018. In that judgment, the Supreme Court had decriminalized homosexuality. But in that very judgment, the Supreme Court did not extend any sort of civil rights to LGBT community. Okay. So that is also, on that ground also the central government is arguing that the judiciary should not intervene in this issue, that is legalization of same-sex marriage. Okay. And lastly, the central government has argued that if we move towards legalization of same-sex marriage, then we would be destabilizing the very institution of family. Because when we say family, even children issues are associated in that. Okay. The current statutory laws which are there in place, for example, Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act 2015, they allow adoption of children to only heterosexual couples. Okay. Homosexual couples are not allowed to adopt children. So it is being argued that since if we move in the direction of legalization of same-sex marriage, we need to consider the issue of child rights as well. That is the reason the central government has argued that let the parliament debate on this issue. The judiciary should not move towards, legalization of same-sex marriage. Now, given we have covered the for and against argument, what needs to be done now? Even if the Supreme Court legalizes same-sex marriage, then also our society is yet not ready to accept same-sex marriage. Then what needs to be done? Because this is something which we are witnessing with respect to Sabrimala judgment as well. Although the Supreme Court allowed entry of women in Sabrimala temple, but the society is yet not ready to accept that change. So what is the way forward? The way forward is we need to educate and make the people aware regarding the rights and problems which are faced by the LGBT community. Okay. Only after educating the people and bringing this change in the societal mindset, we should move towards legalization of same-sex marriage. Okay. This is all that you need to know with regard to this article. Let's move to the next article. Now, this next article pertains to recent changes in IT rules. Okay. Now, this article is very important from your GS paper 2 syllabus, which relates to changes in the constitution. Okay. And with regard to this article, we already have a previous year question which states that discuss section 66A of IT Act with reference to its alleged violation of article 19 of the Indian Constitution. This question was asked in 2013. Try to attempt this question after listening to this debate. Okay. Now, the context is clear to you that recently the central government has brought certain changes in information technology, intermediary guidelines and digital media ethics code rules 2023. Okay. Now, first thing first that we need to understand is what are intermediaries? Okay. Intermediaries are basically the internet service providers, the search engines, okay, the social media messaging platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., which basically stores your data, okay, processes that data, transfers that data, okay. So such, internet service providers or search engines are termed as intermediaries. Okay. Now, the central government has brought these changes in IT rules by exercising the power which it enjoys under Section 87 Subclause 1 of IT Act 2000. Okay. Now, what is the recent change which has been done by the central government? Now, through this Amendment Act, the central government has stated that now the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology would be having the power to establish a fact check unit. Okay, this fact checking unit would be, checking into this aspect that whether any news which is there on the online platform is fake or not. And if that news pertains to any of the business of central government, then the central government would be having all the right to ask that online platform to bring down that particular article or that particular content which pertains to any of the business of central government. Okay. Now, this amendment had made changes in Section 79 of IT Act. What was this section all about? Prior to this amendment, the third party or the intermediaries used to enjoy safe harbor immunity. What is the safe harbor immunity? Prior to this amendment, whatever content, whatever data, whatever information is uploaded on social media platforms or on these websites or these intermediaries were not held liable for that. No sort of criminal proceedings could be initiated against these intermediaries on account of whatever information is uploaded on the online platforms. Okay. But after this amendment, now the intermediaries could be held liable for whatever information is being uploaded on their platforms if they do not bring down that or they do not remove that content from that online platform after the central government has asked to remove that particular content. Okay. Now, in this regard, you need to make note of the famous Shreya Singhal case 2015. In this landmark judgment, the Supreme Court protected the freedom of speech and expression which is provided under Article 19 Subclause 1 of the Indian Constitution by striking down Section 66A of IT Act 2000. What was this section all about? This section criminalized sending offensive messages through computers or through any sort of communication devices. But the issue was, what exactly constitutes offensive messages was not clearly defined in this particular section. And there was no such guidelines to provide that what could be categorized, which message could be categorized as grossly offensive message. Okay. So the Supreme Court in this landmark judgment stated that a law which intends to limit the freedom of speech and expression could not be so vague. Okay, so that is why the Supreme Court struck down Section 66A of IT Act. Okay, now we need to understand what are the issues which are there with regard to the change in IT rules. The first issue is this amendment has also not defined what exactly would be coming under the definition of fake news. Okay. The same thing that we were previously witnessing with respect to Section 66A. In that case also, the definition of frivolous messages or offensive messages was not clear. The same issue we are facing with regard to amended IT rules. The definition of fake news is not clear. This brings me to the another issue, that is the central government has unbridled power to remove online content, okay, from search engines and from different newspapers which are there. Now the press is concerned that by exercising or by misusing the power through this amendment rules, the central government could curb constructive criticism or true criticism of government policies and government business. Okay. The central government has brought in this change without consulting the press or the related parties to this particular change. That is the internet service providers, the intermediaries, the press in this regard. And lastly, the law or the change which is being brought, it is going to have a great impact on the freedom of speech and expression. And this law does not even pertains to any of the ground which is listed under Article 19 subclause 2, which provides for the grounds on the basis of which the freedom of speech and expression could be curbed. Okay, what are those grounds? The grounds are sovereignty and integrity of India, security of state, foreign relations, public order, morality, etc. But this amended IT rules does not pertain to any of the ground which is mentioned under Article 19(2). Okay. Now, what is the way forward? The way forward is the central government needs to have due consultation with the concerned parties, and it should also outline that what information or what content would be coming under the definition of fake news. Okay. This is all that you need to know regarding this article. Let's move towards the third article of today's newspaper. The third article pertains to UN State of World Population Report, which is provided by UN Population Fund. Okay. This article is more relevant from your GS paper 1 topic, which relates to population and associated issues. Okay. And with regard to this, we also have a previous year question which states that examine how demographic dividend is affected by the lack or investment in human capital. Okay. Do try to write this answer after listening to this debate. Okay. Now, the context is clear to you. Recently, the State of World Population Report 2023 is produced by UN Population Fund. Okay. Now, according to this report, in mid-2023 itself, India is going to surpass China when it comes to population growth. In this regard, we need to understand that what are the reasons of population explosion in India? Okay. There could be multiple reasons. First reason is, although India as a whole has achieved the replacement fertility rate of 2.1, but in certain states, for example, in states like Bihar, the fertility rate is still quite high, around 3%. So in certain states, since the total fertility rate is quite high, we are witnessing population explosion. Then there are social factors also. First is meta-son preference. We know that in Indian society, which is guided by patriarchy, parents or couples intend to have a son child, and in account of producing a son child, they intend to reproduce a lot of children. Okay. Then on account of early child marriage, okay, according to UNICEF report, around 27% of girls are married before 18 years. Now, since a girl is married before 18 years, the fertility period increases, okay, the period within which it can produce an offspring, okay. Then in India, in Indian society, we are not habitual of using contraceptives, okay. That is another reason of increase in population, okay. Now, what are the impact of population explosion? It could have positive impacts also and negative impacts also. What are the negative impacts? It would increase the economic burden, okay. It is going to increase the burden on the limited economic resources if we are unable to employ the increased working force, okay. Then it is going to have a bearing on the environmental resources that we are having, because the environmental resources are limited and the population is increasing day by day. Then it is going to, lead towards over-urbanization. Because since a lot of working age population, since they would not be getting employment, they would be migrating towards urban area, and we would be witnessing this issue of slumization, okay, or over-urbanization. Then what could be the positive impacts of population explosion? First is increased economic growth, because as this report also points out, currently around 68% of India population comes under the bracket of working population, which is the population which falls under the age group of 15 years to 64 years, okay. Now, since we have a greater working force, this could, add to economic growth, because historically also, when the advanced economies had, greater working force, they were able to increase their economic growth by 15%. Similar scenario could be witnessed in India if we are able to effectively employ our increased working force. Then it is also going to increase the investments and the saving, because we know that it is the working age population which saves a lot. Okay, so it is going to increase the amount which would be available for further investments. Okay, given then this positive and negative impact, the thing that we need to understand is how are we going to reap this demographic dividend? What is this demographic dividend? That is increased working age population. Okay, we would be able to reap this demographic dividend only when we invest in education, we invest in health of our youth. Okay, so given if we want to reap the benefit of demographic dividend, the state need to increase its expenditure in health and in education. Okay, beyond 2% and 3%. Okay, then we need to create job opportunities in order to address the issue of jobless growth. Right now, according to NSSO report, only 53% of the working age population is employed. Okay, this implies that around half of the working age population is still unemployed. Okay, so we need to increase job opportunities in labor intensive sectors like MSME, like manufacturing sector, like food processing sector, etc. Then we need to increase the female labor force participation, which is currently lagging around 29% only. Okay, so if we are able to increase the labor working force participation, we could increase the economic growth as well. Okay, so these are the steps that we need to take in order to reap the benefit of demographic dividend. This is all that you need to know regarding this particular article. Let's move to the fourth article of today's newspaper, which pertains to CBI files a case against Oxfam India on account of violation of FCRA norms. Okay, this issue pertains to a GS paper 2 syllabus to the topic of developmental processes and development industries. With regard to this, we also have a previous year question which states that can civil society and NGOs present an alternative model of public service delivery to benefit the common citizen? Discuss the challenges of this alternative model. Okay, after listening to this debate and discussion, try to practice this question also. Now, the issue is clear to you, the context is clear that recently CBI has filed a case against Oxfam on account of violation of FCRA norms. What is FCRA? Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Okay. Now, in this regard, we first need to understand that what is civil society, because Oxfam India is one of the civil society. What is civil society? Civil society is basically a non-state and not-for-profit entity. These entities are formed on a voluntary basis, that is the members, on a voluntary basis, they come together to realize their common interests and to serve a common cause. Okay, there could be different kinds of civil society organization. For example, cooperatives are there, NGOs are there, okay, labor unions are there, etc. Now, in this regard, we need to understand that what is the role of civil society in India. Civil society play a major role in ensuring good governance in India. Okay, in this regard, firstly, they act as a watchdog of democracy. Previously, the Lokpal and Lokayukta Bill 2013 was enacted on account of agitation and protest by civil society itself. Okay, so this implies that they act as a watchdog of democracy. Okay, then they also advocate and agitate by becoming the voice of the marginalized section. For example, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan filed a lot of petition, and this led to enactment of or to the passage of Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. Then they also educate the people regarding their rights, regarding their entitlements. Okay, example are Naz Foundation, which is doing a very great job when it comes to educating the people regarding LGBTQ community rights and entitlements. Similar function is being performed by Childline Foundation. Then they also play a major role in filling the developmental gaps. During the COVID-19 itself, it was the civil society organization which reached to the hindered area of India, and they aided the migrant workers. Okay, they provided food, they provided medical facilities to the backward regions of India. Examples like Akshay Patra Foundation. This foundation is doing a great job when it comes to providing food to children in government and government aided schools in midday meal scheme. Okay. Similar work is being done by Pradhan in the field of livelihood generation and in the field of women empowerment. Okay, so this implies that civil society play a very important role in ensuring good governance in India. But there are also certain challenges which are associated with the working of civil society. The first important issue is, at times civil society organizations intend to promote anti-state activities. There were certain NGOs were engaged in funding the terrorists in the J&K region, and certain NGOs and civil societies were also promoting left-wing extremism in the Red Corridor area. Okay. Then there is lack of transparency and accountability when it comes to civil society organizations. Why? Because only a few civil society organizations file their account statements with the income tax department, and only a few have board of governance. And a lot of civil society organizations are also indulged in misappropriation of foreign funding that they are receiving. Okay, and on account of this, previously itself, the government has, suspended the licenses of more than 800 civil society organizations. And in 2017 also, the Ministry of Home Affairs has suspended the FCRA license of Public Health Foundation of India as it was lobbying the Member of Parliament in favor of tobacco control activities. Another issue with civil society organization is that they, a lot of civil society organizations are having affiliations with the political parties, and they are indulged in money laundering and round tripping of funds. There was a report by Intelligence Bureau of India, okay, and it has pointed out that NGOs or civil societies like Greenpeace or Amnesty International are hindering the development of India. Okay, on account of activities of these civil society organizations, Indian economy growth is reduced by 2 to 3%. Okay, so these are the major issues which are associated with civil society organization. Now, in this regard, we also need to understand the amendments which were brought by the central government with regard to FCRA in 2020 itself. And what are the impacts of these amendments we need to understand. Okay. First change that was done through this amendment was with regard to, getting foreign funds, the civil society organization need prior approval from Ministry of Home Affairs. With regard to transferring of foreign funds to non-FCRA registered entities. Okay. Similarly, when it comes to transferring the foreign funding that the civil society organization is getting to FCRA registered organization, the limit has been reduced from 50% to 20%. Now, only 20% of the foreign funding which a civil society organization is getting, they can transfer that amount to FCRA registered other civil society organization. Okay. Now, this is going to severely impact the foreign funding which these organizations are getting. Okay. And this is also going to severely impact the collaborations between different civil society organizations. Then, after this amendment, an NGO or a civil society is allowed to spend only 20% of its budget on administrative expenses. Now, this is going to severely impact the salaries of the people who are working in civil society organizations, and this would also it would also impact the civil society organization, the potential to draw talent from various regions of India. Okay. Then, the amendment rules also provided that now the civil society organization needs to have one FCRA account only, and that needs to be only in SBI Delhi branch only. Now, this is going to severely impact the flow of funds to the NGOs or to the civil society organizations which are working at the very grassroots level. And lastly, through this Amendment Act, the Ministry of Home Affairs have got the power to suspend and to cancel the licenses of the civil society organizations on account of violation of FCRA norms. Now, this is going to severely impact the functioning of the NGOs and civil society organization, especially in critical areas, in tribal areas. Okay, and this gives government sweeping powers. Now, in this regard, what needs to be done? The central government needs to assist the civil society organization when it comes to compliance with FCRA regulation. The central government also needs to consult the civil society organization when it comes to implementation of FCRA norms. Okay, and lastly, an independent regulatory body should be created which would be looking into registration of civil society organization when it comes to FCRA and the suspension of licenses of civil society organizations when it comes to FCRA norms. Okay, this is all that you need to know regarding this particular article. Let's move to the last article of today's newspaper, which pertains to quantum mission. This is more important from the prelim stage of your examination and it pertains to science and technology section. Okay. Now the context is clear to you. Recently the Union Cabinet has approved the quantum mission. Now in this regard, the first thing that we need to understand is what is quantum computing? Quantum computing is one of the emerging technologies which harnesses the law of quantum mechanics to solve complex problems in a fraction of a second. Okay. And this quantum computing also provides the advantage of secure communication. The traditional computers process the information in bits, okay, that is 0 and 1, while quantum computers process the information in qubits, which is a combined state of 0 and 1. Okay. Now, this quantum mission would enable India to become one of the leading nations when it comes to the field of quantum computing, okay, because currently only 6 nations are having this technology right now. Now, what are the deliverables when it comes to this national quantum mission? Under this, intermediate scale quantum computers with 50 to 1000 physical qubits in 8 years in various platforms like supercomputing and photonic technology would be developed. Then we would be moving to in the direction of secure quantum communications, okay. Then we would be also developing the quantum devices and technologies, okay. Then under this 4 thematic hubs would be created which would be related to quantum computing, quantum communication, quantum sensing and metrology and quantum materials and devices. What are the benefits of this particular mission? It would enable to nurture an innovative culture in India. It would give boost to the research and development, culture in India. Then it would create a vibrant and innovative ecosystem when it comes to quantum technology. Then it would accelerate economic growth in India because as I told you, currently only 6 nations are having this quantum technology. So if we also emerge in this field, we could become a leader in this particular technology. This is all that we need to know from today's newspaper. Thank you for listening to this discussion.